Okay, so the um uh last video I did was about Dark Empire, because it was my first um foray into the expanded universe before I started reading all the other books that were coming out in the 90s and before I got into the Thrawn trilogy and all that other stuff. Anyway, this time I wanted to talk about the Darth Bane trilogy because of all the books I had heard about um, throughout, the prequel, the time when the prequels were in the theaters and stuff like that. The books that I always wanted to read were the Darth Bane trilogy, and that's because everything I had heard about them was amazing. And of course, that's why I'm using a background picture of Darth Bane. Um, the Because all I had heard is that it's the reason why the Sith Lord rule of two exists. And so when I finally had a chance to read them, the I was in awe of how well it was written. Like, I didn't feel bored at all reading those books. At all. I like I remember staying up till like 3 or 4 in the morning 2 or 3 nights in a row, even though I had work the next day, reading these things because I couldn't put them down. They were absolutely amazing. I still have mine. I want to reread them actually because I love the Darth Bane trilogy so much. But I'd always been interested in like some of the other stories that dealt with the Sith stuff, but I was never like well, people were all playing KOTOR and KOTOR 2 and, Force Unleashed and all these other things that were going on, and they were talking about, the ancient Old Republic era, you know, um, the Sith Wars and the Hyperspace War and all these other things that were in the early history of the Star Wars expanded universe. The only thing that was ever like I have to read was Darth Bane trilogy. And the way the books are set up and the way they're written, I mean, they flow very well. They give you enough background information to um, uh, get you kind of like who are the characters, what's their point of view, and you you see a lot. Like the first book is really a lot from Darth Bane's perspective. Of course, later you get to see a little bit from the way the chapters written. Some of them kind of show you from Zana's perspective, but especially in the third book. The third book, oh god, the third book is so good. Um, the and you know it doesn't matter what the names are. You can look them up for yourself. You just look up Darth Bane trilogy, and you can look up the names. That's not that important. Um, but while I was reading the first book, the way it was written got me hooked immediately. And you know, like a lot of people put a lot of emphasis saying, "Oh, you have to read the Darth Bane trilogy. You have to. It's amazing. It's amazing." The thing is that um, not only is it amazing, is that it actually made me want to learn more about the early Sith era, the early Republic era, the early, to go back and read the Tales of the Jedi comics. If it wasn't for the Darth Bane trilogy, I wouldn't have gone back to read them. And I wouldn't have read about Exar Kun and, Nomi Sunrider and all this other cool stuff. And, was it Naga Sidao and these other Sith Lords at the time. Um, the the Darth Bane trilogy, if there's anything you want to do in the Old Republic era that's before the prequels, don't play KOTOR, don't play KOTOR 2. Of course, that does have an impact here because, of course, they bring up Revan in the book and they talk, and Darth Bane has one of Revan's holocrons to learn from when it comes to, like, Sith stuff. But, like Sith artifacts and stuff like that. But, it's not as important, um, like you at least have to know, like, oh, there was a Darth Revan, and then he like came back and he was a Jedi again and all this other stuff. Yeah, you should know like tertiary stuff like that, just basic stuff. Um, but the the Darth Bane trilogy can be read in a vacuum and like just it by itself, because it the way the way it was written was just amazing. And you know, for all my like negative speaking of the rat and stuff like that, I'm trying to have some positive things to say, because recently I've been my other places where I'm doing a lot of commentary and translating of news articles to tell people what's going on about Japan and what's going on over here and how the media works over here. It has gotten to me, which is why I want to talk about something positive and try to um, bring out some positive energy, because I've been having too much negative energy for a while. So that's why I'm doing all these little discussions about different EU stuff I've read. Well, real Star Wars canon stuff I read. I mean, expanded universe is okay, but it has to be stated that the EU is the Star Wars canon. There is no other canon. It is only the expanded universe, and you will not change my mind. And you cannot prove me wrong. So, getting back to Darth Bane, my only real my only like overall, it's like it was so perfectly written that there's not really much you can complain about. And the fact that I read it like over a year ago, so some of the things that I read before, it's kind of like shaky. I don't remember everything very clearly about like all the details in the books, but and I've only done a single read through of it, even though I have the books here. I've been reading lots of other books to because I was wanted to read some other books in Japanese and stuff, but and also comics that I bought and wanted to read those too. but but I can tell you, if there was a weak point in the trilogy, if you could say, okay, this out of the three books, this is probably the weakest of the three, is probably the middle one. I think that the world building that is done in the first book is so amazing, and the beginning of book two, like I'm not saying book two is a bad book. Book two is an amazing book. Don't get me wrong. The entire trilogy is like probably the perfect Star Wars trilogy in book form. Period. And I like the Thrawn trilogy. I'm a massive Mara Jade fan, but I can find lots of faults with the Thrawn trilogy. Timothy Zahn is an amazing writer, and people, I'm not bashing Timothy Zahn at all, but I think that when you compare them as trilogy versus trilogy, and of course, because the Thrawn trilogy ends up being one of the key points for all of the rest of the expanded universe, including this, because it talks about the rule of two and all this other stuff. And it talks about certain abilities of the Force that aren't really mentioned in the later, like the prequel trilogy era, the Clone Wars era, or the Rebellion era, which is like episodes 4, 5, and 6. That era, like even Shadows of the Empire would be included in that. I think that as a pure trilogy, in terms of world building, like looking at it just from a trilogy perspective, not as like, okay, this book is better than that book or whatever, but like as a groundwork for a lot of things and for different insights. I think the Darth Bane trilogy is much better written than the Thrawn trilogy. Now, the Thrawn trilogy has so many new worlds, has the Nogri, has, like all the stuff about Vader, and then how they call Leia Lady Vader and all this other stuff. And and it does bring in, Talon Card. It brings in Mara Jade. It brings in Jorah Sabaoth, and who ends up being part of the Timothy Zahn also wrote the Outbound Project books as well. I forgot what they're called. I have them in Japanese. They're expensive, but I think the flow of the story, because it's only focusing on like maybe 2 or 3 key characters, whereas the Thrawn trilogy is focusing on so many different characters. So you have like Luke has got his own stuff going on, Leia has her stuff going on, then you have Han and Lando doing their own thing, and then you've got the Mara Jade stuff, and then you've got the Talon Card stuff where he's like with Admiral Thrawn. You're hearing things from Thrawn's perspective, you're hearing things from Palion's perspective. It's just a huge mess of characters that it's hard to keep track of sometimes, I think, for some readers. And I mean, I like the Thrawn trilogy. I'm not bashing the Thrawn trilogy. I'm just saying from a different perspective, because there is less focus on a huge number of characters. It's very focused on like a couple key characters like Bane and Zana, and then you hear a little bit about other stuff, about the Republic and the Jedi going on, but it's never anything, like very, very in detail. Most of it is from Bane's perspective, and some of it is from Zana's perspective. But especially in book 3, there's a lot of stuff that comes from like Zana's on her own little missions, doing her own little things, and you get to get a glimpse into her own mind and what she's thinking, and in regards to the Rule of Two stuff, and what the Sith are supposed to do within the Rule of Two, how Darth Bane set it up. I just think that it's easier to follow for a lot of people, and it's an easier read because it's not jumping from one scene to another constantly, which is something a Thrawn trilogy does and has to do based on its, the fact that all the characters are spread all over the place doing all different stuff, right? So, that can turn some people off, turn some readers off. So if you like a lot of characters with different scenery and different things like that, you'll probably like the Thrawn trilogy more than the Bane trilogy. But if you like a very focused, a couple key characters with some like some supporting characters that pop up here and there, the Darth Bane trilogy is better. And I'm not, and I want to be clear that I'm not bashing the Thrawn trilogy at all. I love the Thrawn trilogy. But I think for me, and how I felt, even though I had read the Thrawn trilogy ages and ages ago, like over, 30 years ago or something? Almost 30 years ago I read it. After reading the Darth Bane trilogy, I gained it opened my eyes to the early expanded universe stuff, and it allowed me to appreciate, the Tales of the Jedi comics and some of the older stuff that's, a little more obscure that people don't pay much attention to, which I will talk about the Tales of the Jedi comics as well at some point, because those have to be discussed. I don't think they don't get the credit they deserve because of like stuff like the Darth Bane trilogy, to be honest. But I really want people to get their hands on the Darth Bane trilogy, read it, digest it. It's not a lot of action. So if you like a lot of action in your books, you're not going to be very happy with it. It's very, very story driven, and it's very character driven. Whereas it's not really action driven as opposed to some other books in the expanded universe, or other comics in the expanded universe. But the story is so well written. I believe it was James Luceno who wrote it. I believe. And yes, Labyrinth of Evil is amazing too. So, but I'll talk about that one at some point too. But the way he wrote, the way that the books that this trilogy is written was so smooth, it almost felt like a single book that you're reading. Like, you didn't, like, I had all 3 books there, so as soon as I finished one, I could pick up the next one and start reading. But because of that, it felt like one long book and not a trilogy of books. And it was, it was very smooth. It was very smooth transitions between chapters. There was a lot of, well written dialogue when there was dialogue necessary between characters. Um, the I think that the the character of Darth Bane, I think, really interests me a lot because he's a very cerebral Sith. He realized when he was with the Brotherhood of the I think it was the Brotherhood of the Sith, or Sith Brotherhood, something like that. He, like, all of the other, Sith that were there were were much more powerful in the Force than he was. So they could use their powers. They could, like, use their powers much better than he could. The thing is that because he was so cerebral, he would sit in the, the Sith library that they had or whatever, and he would just study the ancient lore of the Sith, and that ended up showing him that what the Brotherhood was trying to do was against the rules of the Sith. And so he wanted to return the Sith to its natural order. And the reason why the Sith couldn't beat the Jedi was because there were too many of them. So he realized, okay, I have to get rid of all these Sith. And because we need to get back to what the Sith originally were. Because even during the time of Darth Revan, they had Darth Malak, and that was his apprentice who ended up killing him. And then, of course, Revan got revived and all this other stuff, right? That's all in, like, Coder 1, Coder 2, that stuff. So if people want to know about that, go take a look at that. But when he started finding out about all these, like, there's these other planets that were Sith controlled that probably have a holocron there, I should go and look for it. And he never he used his ability to think through everything to like study and learn, and then pass that knowledge on to his apprentice, so that the apprentice would then move on and continue the line of the rule of two, right? I think that, and the way that he finds Zana is really interesting too, and I like the fact, and I like how he finds her. I like how he just says, okay, you're my apprentice now, come with me, kind of thing, which was really, really cool. I thought that whole sequence at the beginning when he first finds her was absolutely amazing. But the I think what is it? The fact that he's more of a person who studies and doesn't, like, have the ability, like the actual, force sensitivity to use certain like overpowered abilities or whatever, and that he instead chooses to sit and just learn from the books and the holocrons, and to study all that stuff, to attempt viewing things like that black hole thingy, that force black hole thingy that he uses, basically wipes out everybody, which is really, really cool. I thought that was absolutely amazing. And also the thing that this book goes into more than other books when it comes to discussing, the Sith, is before he joins the Brotherhood and before he's found to be a force sensitive and he runs off and goes to do his thing, his life was messed up. Like, his father had a bunch of debts, and so they got turned into slaves on a slave labor colony. And then because his father died due to overworking and due to the damage that was done over years and years of him being in, having to work off all that labor, his son, which is Darth Bane, had to, also continue that to pay off those loans that his father did. It just, you feel very sorry for him. And then when he starts to, like, build his rage towards certain groups of people, like the Jedi and stuff, you can actually feel that he's channeling that energy that, from the torment that he had to deal with for most of his life, living in horrible poverty, barely able to eat, and, like, and only being able to earn money through, like, gambling, and using what force sensitivity he had to be able to swindle money out of what, I think he was playing Sabak, I think. But there was like some game he would gamble on when he after work or whatever, and it was I found that the detail they went into his backstory of why he like how he felt so bad and all this other stuff, and you feel sorry for him. You literally feel sorry for him. You're like, dude, if I was him, I'd probably do the same thing he did. I'd be out for blood too. So that's all in the first book. The stuff about his backstory, like in the beginning, very very well written. I can't recommend it anymore, but read Dark Empire first. Start with Dark Empire, then you can do the Darth Bane trilogy. Uh, but I want to just do a little short thing talking about how much I love the Darth Bane trilogy, how I've read it and enjoy it. I'm not sure which book I will talk about next. Could be the Revenge of the Sith novelization. It might be Labyrinth of Evil. It might be something else. I haven't decided yet. It could be Truce of Bakura because nobody talks about Truce of Bakura. Truce of Bakura is amazing. I don't know why it doesn't get the recognition that it doesn't get more recognized in the expanded universe stories. I mean, I know the Darth Bane trilogy is amazing, and you have other great stories. The Thrawn trilogy is great, and there's lots of other stuff there. But Truce at Bakura is a single book that really, people need to be spending more time on. I haven't decided if I'll talk about that one yet, but or when I'll talk about that one. But I wanted to get through the Darth Bane trilogy, talk about that a little bit and my impressions of it. And I absolutely love it. Read Dark Empire, then go back, and because it's easier to read a 6-issue comic that's like maybe 20 pages each, 30 pages each issue, than it is to read a 3-book trilogy that's like 400 pages each book or something, 300 something pages each book. So, but I highly recommend it. I know a lot of people probably say that, but I'm going to say it too, because it was the one Old Republic, like from the KOTOR era of the Old Republic, that really I spent years wanting to read it, and I finally could read it, and I was so happy I did. So I hope that everybody else gets a chance to read it too. So I haven't decided what book I'll do next, but do subscribe. I'll continue to talk about EU books that I've read, or maybe something I might read soon. That I haven't decided what I'll read yet, but yeah, that's all for this video, and please subscribe. I'll be talking more about Star Wars. I'm gonna start doing more talks about Japanese animation and stuff like that too, so and if you want my political commentary stuff, links in the pinned comment below, and you can go check out all my political commentary down there if you want to take a look at it. I recommend some of it because it's important to understand what's going on here in Japan. But for now, I'm going to be sticking to just talking about some like Star Wars canon stuff, so aka EU stuff for the time being. So see you next time.